Part 4. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 31. Feng Jinzi's words in the princess's mansion were immoral and disrespectful. He repeatedly spoke ill of me and failed to abide by the upbringing and demeanor that a disciple of a noble family should have. I can't let him go. Chu Qinghuang's tone became more and more indifferent. Every word is like quenched ice. Ms. Feng should know that one of the 7 rules is called tonguing. Do you want a person who offends you to be divorced or stay here, in the palace? Do you want me to find an excuse to have a rough time every once in a while? After the words fell, Ms. Feng's expression completely froze. Chu Qinghuang's voice was calm. You have to be in a good mood to enjoy flowers and drink tea. I'm not in a good mood today. Let's talk about it later when we have time. After saying that, he turned around and walked out. I will give Feng Jinzi another 3 days to recover from his injuries. After 3 days, Ms. Feng had better send someone to pick him up, otherwise don't blame me for using extraordinary measures. Madame Feng was so angry that she was shaking all over. She stared at the back of Chu Qinghuang, who was so arrogant that he had no rules at all. She clenched her hands tightly and her cheeks kept twitching. How majestic Feng Jinzi was when she was being held in the past, now she is in such a state of embarrassment. Chu Qinghuang arrived for less than a stick of incense and didn't even sit on a chair, but slapped her countless times in front of all the maids of the Feng family, making her, a first-grade lady, lose all face. Madame Feng was so filled with hatred that she wished Chu Qinghuang would die suddenly on the spot. 7th sister, a familiar voice suddenly sounded from behind. The flower viewing party hasn't even started yet. Why did 7th sister leave? Chu Qinghuang stopped and turned to look at Chu Yuling, who was walking out of the inner courtyard without saying a word. Chu Yuling came over and took the initiative to hold Chu Qinghuang's hand. The peonies in Fengyuan garden are blooming very well, and there are also some sumptuous refreshments and fruits prepared in the pavilion. They are all fresh. 7th sister is coming with me. Go try it. Chu Qinghuang looked down at her enthusiastic movements and said calmly, you didn't prepare any conspiracy to deal with me, did you? Chu Yuling's expression froze, and then she chuckled. What did Kame say? I have the heart of a bear and the courage of a leopard, so I dare to plot against you. There is indeed no conspiracy, but today's tea is not in vain. Chu Qinghuang's eyebrows deepened slightly. In that case, I will just sit down and leave. Peony flowers are in full bloom at this time. Large tracts of pink peonies are spread out in layers in the garden. The flowers are brightly colored and graceful. Looking from a distance, it is indeed stunning. Ms. Feng and her daughter followed the 2 princesses. Their expressions were not very good. When they entered the garden, the breeze blew on their faces, and the cool air finally managed to wash away the depressed emotions in their hearts. The 4 of them walked up to the pavilion together. Chu Qinghuang looked around and said in an indifferent tone, didn't you talk about the flower viewing party today? Others haven't come yet. I didn't invite too many people here today, but the weather is nice this 18th. We will hold a Kushui Shangqing banquet in the suburbs of the city. 7th sister, let's go together then. There are many people, and all the noble ladies are there. It will be very popular then. Lively Chu Yuling smiled lightly and said in a low voice, maybe some handsome young men will also be present. Chu Qinghuang's eyes were delicate. She had really tried her best for Feng Jinzi, but she dared to use a beauty trick on her in front of Ms. Feng, both overtly and covertly. Chu Qinghuang glanced at Ms. Feng and saw that her expression was not very good actually, it was normal. If his son could marry and have children normally, as the wife of the prime minister of a country, no matter which famous lady married into the prime minister, in the house, I am afraid that I have to grovel, take care of myself every morning and dusk, and serve my parents-in-law carefully. Who dares to punish her husband by kneeling down like Chu Qinghuang and turn a blind eye to her mother-in-law? Who would dare to do such a shocking thing as adopting a male pet? At this time, Chu Qinghuang seemed to understand Ms. Feng's aggrievedness, but she did not sympathize with her. The status of the legitimate son of the Prime Minister's mansion was enough to make Feng Jinzi aloof in this life. The madam holds her head high among the noble ladies of the imperial capital, and her scenery is endless. It's a pity that their appetite is too big, and the status of the Prime Minister's wife and the Prime Minister's legitimate son obviously cannot satisfy them. They want to be relatives of the emperor, become the emperor's relatives, hold the power of Konglong to be awarded a marquis and title, and want to be hereditary for 100 years. So whether it is frustration or humiliation, you can only bear it by yourself. Seventh sister Chu Yuling raised her hand to pour tea for her. Her voice was gentle and patient, and it really sounded like an elder sister talking to her younger sister. Jinzi used to have a bit of a stubborn temper. In fact, it's not that he didn't like Kime, it's just that all this time. He asked you to be a lobbyist, Chu Qinghuang interrupted her. Of course not. Chu Yuling shook her head and smiled. I couldn't bear to see a misunderstanding between you, so I couldn't help but want to be a peacemaker. I hope Kime can understand my painstaking efforts. Chu Qinghuang picked up the teacup and brought it to her lips, but did not drink it immediately. Instead, she took a sip and then said calmly, your painstaking efforts. Yeah, you don't know how anxious I am when I see you misunderstanding. Chu Yuling sighed. Jinji mentioned you in front of me before, but Kime, don't get me wrong, he and I after all, we are cousins. We are like brothers and sisters. In his heart, Sister Wanyu and I are the same. Feng Wanyu nodded, yes, the same. Chu Qinghuang said nothing. He has often mentioned you in front of me before. Although he always had a slightly dissatisfied tone, I can tell that he really likes you, but... Chu Yuling smiled bitterly, it's just that he is arrogant and always feels that living in the princess's mansion means he is marrying into the princess's family. Therefore, he inevitably feels inferior because he lives under someone else's roof, so he often speaks ill of my seventh sister. In fact, these are not his intentions. He just doesn't know how to express his feelings to my seventh sister, so he speaks ill of her unconsciously every time he speaks. Later, I analyzed that he might subconsciously want to attract your attention in this way. Chu Qinghuang said lightly, really? Madame Feng saw her absent-minded attitude and really had the urge to splash tea on her face. Madame Feng's self-cultivation is still a little lacking. Chu Qinghuang raised her eyes, her gaze intentionally or unintentionally passing over the teacup in her hand. Do you really want to splash me with tea? Madame Feng was shocked, and smiled awkwardly. How could it be? It's better not to, after all, impulse will cause bad things. I don't know what I will do after being angered. Chu Qinghuang lowered her head to drink tea. Madame Feng can actually eat vegetarian food, chant Buddha, cultivate her body and mind, and get rid of the impetuous spirit in her body when she has nothing to do. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 32. Madame Feng clenched her teacup tightly, and she could hardly even smile. This ruthless bitch. When she liked Jin before, she was so polite to her mother-in-law, but now she looks so cold, as if the emperor is traveling. Who is she showing off to? Isn't she just a straw bag and a thorny princess? Apart from her brute force and bad temper, what else is left? If concubine Duan had not been meritorious in protecting the emperor, she would have been banished to the cold palace to fend for herself with such a temper. Who would indulge her arrogance? Is the Feng family tradition to teach children to curse? Chu Qinghuang raised her eyes to look at Madame Feng, her eyes calm and sharp. Are you proud of cursing, bitch? Madame Feng's face turned pale, and at that moment she even thought that she had accidentally cursed out what was in her mind. What does your highness mean? The Feng family tradition is strict, and they have very strict requirements for their children. They must not make bad words, and they must cultivate their morals and self-cultivation. Really, Chu Qing Huang smiled faintly. I thought that the Feng family was proud of cursing, otherwise how could Feng Jinzi be so eloquent when cursing? It turned out that it was not taught by Madame Feng. Madame Feng was frightened and her face was extremely pale. Your Highness misunderstood, the Prime Minister is a scholar, gentle and elegant, and the Feng family is also a noble family. The children's words and behaviors are all restricted by family rules. It seems that the family rules still cannot restrain Feng Jinzi. Chu Qing Huang stood up. It doesn't matter, I will teach him what good words mean. Madame Feng's face changed again. Seventh sister, Chu Yuling stood up and looked at her uneasily. Think carefully about what I just said. Jinzi is really a sincere person. If you two can achieve a happy marriage, it will definitely be a perfect match. Chu Qing Huang turned to look at her. Really? Chu Yuling nodded quickly. Since he is so good, I will give him to you. Chu Qing Huang said indifferently, take him back in 3 days. When I am free in a few days, I will go to the palace to ask the emperor to grant you a marriage. Don't thank me too much. Just don't bother me anymore in the future. After saying this, she turned and walked out of the pavilion, obviously not intending to stay any longer. Seventh sister, Chu Yuling's face changed drastically, and she hurriedly chased after him. That's not what I meant. Seventh sister, listen to me. Unfortunately, Chu Qing Huang didn't want to hear anything more from her. People who practice martial arts are naturally strong, and they are much more agile than those delicate young ladies. In a few blinks of an eye, Chu Qing Huang took Fu Kang out of the Feng family garden and walked straight to the gate. Why did the seventh sister leave? As soon as Chu Qing Huang stepped out of the gate, she saw Chu Tianyan getting off the carriage. The other party was wearing a royal blue satin robe, and his whole body exuded the superiority and nobility of the prince of the Tian family. Seeing Chu Qing Huang, he naturally raised a smile at the corner of his lips. I'm here to see my uncle and aunt. Seventh sister, come in with me. Chu Qing Huang glanced at him indifferently, turned around and walked towards her carriage. Chu Tianyan was stunned, and subconsciously stretched out his hand to stop her. Seventh sister, ah! A sound of breaking wind sounded, and Fu Kang raised his hand and chopped at his wrist in a flash, and severe pain exploded in his wrist, and the wrist bone seemed to be broken. Chu Tianyan hugged his arm and groaned, his face pale with pain. Swish! The guards behind Chu Tianyan all drew out their long swords, shining with cold light, and pointed at Fu Kang standing beside Chu Qing Huang. Assassinating the prince is an unforgivable crime. Rebellion against superiors is punishable by death. Please surrender. Chu Qing Huang frowned slightly and looked at the guards in front of him coldly. Want to die? The guards looked stern and looked at each other uneasily, then looked at Chu Qing Huang. The guards of Her Royal Highness the Princess injured the prince, which is a crime of rebellion against superiors and should be executed. Really? Chu Qing Huang slowly pulled out the whip from his waist. Who will go first? The severe pain on Chu Tianyan's wrist eased a little, and then he gritted his teeth and looked up at Chu Qing Huang. Seventh sister. Chu Qing Huang looked at him. Chu Tianyan suppressed his anger and ordered lightly, you all retreat. The guards put away their swords and retreated. Seventh sister Chu Tianyan endured the pain of his wrist bones breaking, walked to Chu Qing Huang, and looked at Fu Kang standing beside him with cold and vigilant eyes. Are the servants around you so unruly? He is just eager to protect his master, Chu Qing Huang said in a nonchalant tone. Third brother, remember to stay away from me in the future, otherwise I'm afraid you will really lose a hand next time. Chu Tianyan's anger was instantly aroused, and he said coldly, Seventh sister, do you mean that you can assassinate the prince just because you are eager to protect your master? Then can he also assassinate the Empress Dowager and assassinate my father? Chu Qing Huang's eyes were cold. My shadow guard does have this privilege. Chu Tianyan was furious, so arrogant. He looked at Chu Qing Huang coldly and was about to scold her, but when he met her cold eyes, he suddenly felt that this imperial sister seemed to have a stronger aura and more pressure than before. She was just violent and manic before, doing things just to vent her emotions, completely ignoring the consequences. Now he was truly that kind of cold and indifferent character, hiding all his emotions perfectly, but still arrogant and aloof to the point of being feared by others. The murderous aura hidden in his bones rushed towards him, making him feel cold all over. It was like a basin of cold water was poured over his head. Chu Tianyan thought about his current situation, Chu Qinghuang's newly appointed status as the eldest princess, her self-willed temper, and the resentment she had recently aroused, and took a deep breath. He couldn't offend Chu Qinghuang yet. At least before the crown prince was appointed, he couldn't be an enemy of Chu Qinghuang, a madwoman, otherwise no one knew what crazy things she would do. Chu Tianyan suppressed the emotional fluctuations in his heart and forced himself to smile. Seventh sister, today is a good day. I am planning to go to your house to see Jinzi. Do you have anything else to do? Do you mind if I come with you? I do. Chu Qinghuang walked around him and got on her carriage. I like quietness and don't want to be disturbed. Chu Tianyan came here today to see Chu Qinghuang. Naturally, he didn't want to watch her leave at this time. He hurried to the front of the carriage. Seventh sister, there is something. Fu Kang sat in front of the carriage, holding the whip and flicking it. The two horses raised their hooves and neighed sharply. Chu Tianyan's pupils shrank suddenly. Your Highness! Your Highness, be careful! Several guards hurried forward and pulled Chu Tianyan over at the critical moment. Then the horse hooves fell to the ground, and the carriage carrying Chu Qinghuang galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust. Chu Tianyan was frightened and had dirt all over his face. He was so angry that his face turned blue. He pointed at the departing carriage with trembling hands. You are so outrageous. Extremely outrageous. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 33. Third brother Chu Yuling walked out of the gate and saw Chu Tianyan with a grim face. Naturally, she guessed that he was angry with Chu Qinghuang. She walked up to him and looked at the direction where the carriage left. Third brother, do you think that the seventh sister is very strange recently? Chu Tianyan tilted his head to look at her. Abnormal. Chu Yuling nodded, her eyes slightly deep. If a person has never been stimulated, will his temperament suddenly change? The seventh sister used to like Jinzi, to the extent that she would respond to any request, and was also very polite to us. Every time she came to the Feng family as a guest, she respected her uncle and aunt even more. However, everything changed from the first time she punished Jinzi. She attacked Jinzi, sneered at her. The sixth sister was impatient with Chu Tianyan, and no longer respected Mrs. Feng. It was as if all the love before was an illusion. What exactly caused these changes? Chu Yuling was puzzled. You went to visit Jinzi before, but didn't you ask him the reason? What happened to cause Chu Qinghuang's sudden change of temperament? I asked. Chu Yuling frowned. Jinzi drugged the shadow, and when the drug took effect, he brought people in. The development of the matter was the same as our plan, and nothing went wrong, but Chu Qinghuang's reaction was unexpected by Jinzi. According to their plan, Chu Qinghuang should punish the shadow Fu Kang, not Feng Jinzi, but Chu Qinghuang did not play by the rules that day unless Chu Qinghuang already knew that Feng Jinzi deliberately plotted against her by drugging Fu Kang. However, Chu Qinghuang was strong in martial arts, but simple-minded, and it was impossible for her to find out so easily. And even if she knew, what would happen? Chu Qinghuang used to hate Fu Kang the most, and she should punish Fu Kang. Seventh sister's attitude towards the shadows has changed. Chu Tianyan frowned, thinking of Chu Qinghuang's protection of Fu Kang just now. His eyes were gloomy. Fu Kang is too powerful, with him around, many things can't be done, and the shadows from the dark cabinet have better intelligence than others. What should we do? Chu Yuling's face changed slightly. If Chu Qinghuang can't be used by us, then she means a variable that may exist at any time for the third emperor. We must find a way to get rid of her. Chu Tianyin didn't speak for a while, and didn't know what he was thinking. Minister Wen of the Ministry of Revenue will celebrate his 50th birthday in a few days. This may be our opportunity, Chu Yuling whispered. If Chu Qinghuang gets into trouble in the Wen family, it will be a two birds with one stone for us. At that time, we can create a perfect excuse, saying that Chu Qinghuang found evidence of Wen Xingyun's corruption, and Wen Xingyun wanted to kill him to silence him. Wen Xingyun is an official of concubine Duan's party. This time, he and Chu Qinghuang will both lose, and they can reap the benefits. Chu Tianyin's eyes lit up, and he nodded slowly. This is a good idea, but we need reliable people to implement it. It doesn't take many reliable people. Chu Yuling's lips showed a calculating smile. The Wen family's legitimate son and the Wen family's illegitimate son are not on good terms. It would be more perfect to let the Wen family's legitimate son implement the plan directly, and we can stay out of it. Chu Tianyin turned his head to look at her, and a smile appeared on the corner of his lips. Sixth sister is smart. Chu Yuling said coquettishly, third brother, you said this, don't you see whose daughter I am? Chu Tianyin nodded and sighed suddenly. If sixth sister also has the martial arts of Chu Qinghuang, it would be even better. We don't need to please others at all. Third brother, don't worry, Chu Yuling said, the competition for the throne does not rely on brute force, but on the brain. Only with strategies can capable people be used by the third brother. Just wait for the third brother to sit in that position. After a pause, Chu Yuling's voice became lower. Are you still worried that there are no masters to use? This sentence touched Chu Tianyin's heart. He was already imagining the scene of himself taking that position and commanding everyone to obey him. The entire court would prostrate themselves on the ground, kneeling respectfully to pay respect to the emperor, and shouting long live the emperor. The 3,000 beauties in the harem tried their best to please him, and he could kill anyone he wanted with a single order, and live anyone he wanted. What is Chu Qinghuang? What is Fu Kang? All of them should die. Chu Tianyin took a deep breath and suppressed the emotions in his heart. That position would definitely be his, it must be his, and for this, he would not hesitate even if his hands were stained with the blood of his own brothers and sisters. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 34. Since she proposed the confiscation of property in the palace that day, Chu Qinghuang has not entered the palace for several days and there has been no movement. The civil and military officials in the court could not help but wonder, could it be that the princess has not found evidence yet? Or, that day she just made a self-righteous proposal, and after returning home, she found that the confiscation of property was not reliable and easy to offend people, so now she is in a dilemma and does not know how to end it? However, others speculated, but they did not dare to take it lightly. On April 12, the weather was fine. Wen Xingyun, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue, held a banquet in the mansion to celebrate his 50th birthday and invited colleagues and powerful princes in the court to come and have a drink. Although the position of the assistant minister is not a high position, most of the ministers in the court have their own positions. Now concubine Duan is in great favor. As a minister of concubine Duan's party, naturally many people will come to the banquet to celebrate the birthday for the sake of concubine Duan and the fifth prince. Moreover, Wen Zhan, the illegitimate son of the Wen family, is still the servant of the eldest princess. This time he will definitely come back to celebrate his father's birthday. Some people, with the intention of finding out the clues, brought gifts to the Wen family to celebrate Wen Xingyun's birthday. The mansion was very lively. At this time, in the princess's mansion, Wen Zhan was still sitting on the soft couch in the bedroom of the west garden, holding the gold-plated post he had received a few days ago with his slender fingertips, and looked at it quietly for a long time, as if he could see something on the post. Mr. When the maid walked into the room and the sound of respectful salute sounded, breaking the long silence in the room, "Her Highness the Princess asked you how long it would take." When Jean raised his eyes and raised a faint smile at the corner of his lips, "I'll go now." As he said that, he stood up, wearing a sky-blue brocade robe that made him tall and his face was like jade, and the arc at the corner of his lips just revealed his gentleness. If you don't talk about family background, put aside the status of a bastard, Wen Zhan is a nobleman from a famous family. After leaving the west courtyard, Wen Zhan walked towards the princess's front yard leisurely, looking not in a hurry. Indeed, there was no need to be in a hurry. Under normal circumstances, Wen Xingyun might hold him accountable for any mistake, or his eldest brother might sneer at him, abuse him, and humiliate him, but today, with Chu Qinghuang here, no one should dare to act wildly against him. Chu Qinghuang, wearing a dark red dress, stood in front of the door with her hands behind her back. Wen Zhan walked over and saluted respectfully, "Your Highness." Chu Qinghuang glanced at him, "Let's go." "Your Highness, please." Chu Qinghuang turned and walked out, and Wen Zhan followed her. When he walked out of the gate, he saw only one carriage outside. He was silent for a moment, and heard Chu Qinghuang say, "We two will ride in the same carriage." Wen Zhan was slightly surprised, and then he understood what she meant. Since she had to support him, she naturally had to show a favoritism attitude, but in this way, she would not worry about affecting her reputation. And Wen Zhan glanced at Fu Kang, who was silent. Recently, this shadow player was very close to His Highness. "What are you waiting for?" Chu Qinghuang got on the carriage and saw Wen Zhan still hesitating, so she said lightly, "Do you still want to go back?" Wen Zhan didn't hesitate anymore and got on the carriage. Fu Kang sat in front of the carriage and drove. After entering the carriage, Wen Zhan raised a light and humble smile, "Will this damage your Highness's reputation?" "Reputation?" Chu Qinghuang raised her eyes to look at him, her eyes were quite subtle. "I even have a male concubine to serve the king, do I still need to worry about my reputation?" Wen Zhan choked immediately. It seems to be true. Perhaps Chu Qinghuang's temper has been a little different from before recently, so that he has temporarily forgotten her nature. "Actually, I don't quite understand." Wen Zhan sat aside and spoke carefully, "Since your Highness has taken us all into the backyard, why hasn't he ever been, close to us?" Chu Qinghuang frowned, "Do you want to sleep with him?" Wen Zhan almost choked on his own saliva. "No." He calmed down and replied calmly, "I'm just asking, don't think too much, your Highness." Chu Qinghuang lowered her head to read a book, her voice more leisurely than usual, "Anyway, you are all my people, and you will not be able to escape sooner or later. You should be the one who doesn't think too much." Wen Zhan. "I am still young, and I don't have the heart to think about these things for the time being." Chu Qinghuang turned a page of the book, as if explaining to him, "Even the prince consort doesn't have this opportunity, and you won't have it for the time being." Wen Zhan. The implication is to tell him that he doesn't have to worry about losing his virginity for the time being? Wen Zhan scratched his nose awkwardly, and found that he, a man, was not as straightforward and generous as Chu Qinghuang, a woman. This woman really dared to say anything. So in the following time, in order to avoid hearing more explosive words, Wen Zhan sat quietly by the side the whole time, and wisely stopped disturbing Chu Qinghuang's reading. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 35. Chu Qinghuang and Wen Zhan arrived not too early. All the guests who were due to arrive at this time had arrived. Several carriages were parked outside the Wen mansion, and all the prominent officials and ministers in the court were coming in and out. Even the prince didn't hesitate to come and support him. However, even so, When the carriage of the princess palace stopped outside the gate, the air was still almost imperceptible. The atmosphere was noticeably quieter. The guests who were about to walk in, as well as the Wen family servants outside the gate who were responsible for welcoming the distinguished guests, all looked at the carriage quietly, and even exchanged glances calmly. Is the person in the carriage the eldest Princess Chu Qinghuang? No one is sure. It wasn't until the curtain of the carriage was opened by a pair of slender white hands, and when Jean stepped out of the carriage, that everyone didn't know whether they were disappointed or relieved, and then a mocking voice sounded. It turns out to be the second young master Wen. What's the matter? It would be more honorable to come back in the eldest princess's carriage to wish Mr. Wen a birthday. Chu Qinghuang was about to get up and get out of the car when she heard these words. She frowned and sat back down again. The second young master is really very arrogant. It's Master Wen's birthday today. Even several princes and important ministers arrived early. As the master's son, the second young master is late in arriving. I wonder what you are worried about. Isn't it because you won favor in the eldest princess's house that you don't know your last name? Second young master Wen is a very talented person. He is very handsome and handsome. He is lucky enough to be able to fall into the eyes of the eldest princess. However, his status as a servant is low and he cannot be on the stage. Second young master, please do not think that this is an honorable status. Wen Zhan stood beside the carriage and smiled as more and more people mocked and belittled him. Most of them were the young masters who played with Wen Li. The expression on his face never changed, and he just listened patiently. If he had a folding fan in his hand at this moment, he probably wouldn't mind opening it and pretending to be a noble man. It's really embarrassing, a voice resounded from the crowd. How could Mr. Wen give birth to such a thing? A good birthday must be tainted with some bad luck. That's right, if it were me, I wouldn't have the nerve to come back tonight. It's not just that you don't have the shame to come back. If you have a more violent temper, you may have found a place to hang yourself long ago. How can you dare to come back and embarrass yourself? Wen Zhan smiled gently. After hearing this, he finally asked politely, are you just here, or did you come out specifically to ridicule me after hearing the news? Everyone was angry. Are you worthy? Who wants to see your disgusting face? Do you feel proud to be the seventh princess's servant? Wen Zhan slowly shook his head. Being the seventh princess's servant is not something to be proud of, but being favored by the seventh princess can make you domineering. As he spoke, he smiled and said, I forgot to tell you that Her Royal Highness the Princess came back with me tonight. As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of all the young masters present changed, and they all looked at the carriage in unison. When Zhan turned around and opened the curtain, Wen Ya smiled and said, the way they welcome His Highness tonight is a bit special. Please be considerate of His Highness. Only then did Chu Qinghuang step out of the carriage. His posture was calm and solemn, his appearance was beautiful and indifferent, and his eyes were like ice, passing over the faces of everyone in front of him. As if a layer of frightening cold air had been scraped across their cheeks, the young masters gathered outside the gate turned pale unconsciously and backed away slightly. Thinking of the princess's violent temperament since she was a child, cold sweat broke out on her forehead. See Her Royal Highness the eldest princess. I don't know who knelt down first because of weak legs, and then there was a sound of thump and thump like dumplings being dropped. Suddenly, people were kneeling outside the door of the Wen family. They were all dressed in beautiful clothes and had fair faces. They were all pampered. The son of aristocratic family. See Her Royal Highness the Princess. See Her Royal Highness the Princess. The anxious sounds of worshipping fell silent, and the surroundings seemed to fall into deathly silence. Chu Qinghuang glanced around with ice-like eyes, and said in an indifferent tone, everyone who spoke just now, slap your mouth 20 times, and I will not whip you, otherwise you will have brain damage. As soon as he finished speaking, the air suddenly became frozen. There was already a servant inside the gate who quietly turned around to report to the master. Wen Zhan said with a smile, "Everyone, you should do as you do, otherwise if there is blood on this great day, it will be bad for everyone." The young masters secretly resented this and began to raise their hands to slap themselves in the face. Where there is one there are two, and when there are two there are three. Some people took the lead, while others could only raise their hands to draw left and right bows. Although their voices were small, their faces were completely lost, and they all just hated Wen Zhan to their core. Chu Qinghuang walked towards the gate and said as he walked, "The voice is too quiet, I can't hear it." Everyone's hearts trembled, and the sound of slaps suddenly became louder. At this moment, a burst of rapid footsteps came from the door, and then a middle-aged man in brocade clothes appeared in front of Chu Qinghuang, looking at the chaotic scenes on both sides in shock. What is going on?" "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 36. Chu Qinghuang looked at him expressionlessly. Wen Xingyun turned his eyes slightly and saw Wen Zhan standing beside Chu Qinghuang. His eyes suddenly became sharp. However, before he could say anything, he saw Wen Zhan humbly bowing to him. "Hello, father." Wen Xingyun's expression sank. "What's going on?" Wen Zhan stood up straight and reminded considerately, "Father seems to have forgotten to bow to His Royal Highness the Princess." Wen Xingyun's face changed slightly, and he subconsciously looked at Chu Qinghuang. However, his eyes only fell on Chu Qinghuang's face for a moment, and then he bowed his head and knelt down. "Your Highness, I pay my respects to Her Royal Highness, and may Your Highness live 1,000 years. Madam Wen and his legitimate son Wen Li who followed him had to kneel down. "You pay your respects to Her Royal Highness, and may Your Highness live 1,000 years. "No need to bow," Chu Qinghuang said coldly. "Today is Lord Wen's birthday. This palace and Wen Zhan came here to wish His Highness a happy birthday. By the way, I have something to discuss with His Highness." "Something to discuss?" Wen Xingyun's heart skipped a beat. "Your Highness, please speak. This is not the place to talk." Wen Xingyun understood instantly, turned around and gestured, "Your Highness, please." Chu Qinghuang walked into the gate, suddenly stopped, and said indifferently, "These gossipers spoke rudely to my servant. Their words were extremely unpleasant and immoral. I will give them a slight punishment. If it offends Lord Wen, I apologize here." At that moment, Wen Xingyun almost thought he had heard it wrong. The seventh princess, who has always been cold and violent, actually apologized to him. "It's not flattered, but it's a little frightened, but more of the displeasure in my heart just now has silently dissipated." At this time, Wen Xingyun had no time to care whether his son was the servant of the eldest princess. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness, please forgive me. I am afraid and dare not apologize to you. As long as this evil god doesn't whip him at his birthday banquet, he will be happy." The group then walked into the Wen family mansion. When the Wen family servant went to report the news, he only quietly told Wen Xingyun, and Wen Xingyun brought his wife and legitimate son Wen Li to meet the emperor. The other guests were staying in the Shuiyun pavilion of the Wen family at this time. Shuiyun pavilion is divided into 3 floors, upper, middle and lower. The first floor entertains court colleagues of the same level or lower than Wen Xingyun. The second floor is mostly occupied by young legitimate sons of noble families. The third floor is where the princes and dignitaries are entertained. Chu Qinghuang is a female guest, so naturally she will not sit with men. However, she did not sit in the female guest room. After ordering someone to deliver the gift, Chu Qinghuang and Wen Xingyun went to the study together, and Wen Zhan went to the second floor of Shuiyun pavilion alone. When the young masters of noble families saw him, they were all surprised. "Second Master Wen, a man in a sky blue brocade shirt sat facing the stairs. He saw Wen Zhan coming up and said in surprise, "Shouldn't you be in the princess's mansion? Why are you here?" The other men at the banquet turned their heads and looked at Wen Zhan with different eyes. However, although these men who were guests here were all young, not all of them were the same kind of people as the Wen family's legitimate sons. Most of the real legitimate sons of aristocratic families were well educated, and there were many who had both knowledge and character. Wen Zhan smiled and greeted everyone. "Today is my father's birthday banquet, I came back to celebrate my father's birthday." Paused, "The princess came with me." He said this without the intention of showing off, purely to prevent anyone from provoking and mocking him without knowing the consequences. Although he was not afraid of trouble, it was annoying to encounter trouble one after another, especially some tasteless verbal disputes, like a shrew scolding in the street. Even if he had the upper hand, it would inevitably affect people's mood. "Her Royal Highness the Princess is here too." The man in the sky blue brocade shirt was even more surprised. "Doesn't she always dislike this kind of occasion?" Wen Zhan smiled calmly and said, "I asked Her Royal Highness to come along." Everyone understood immediately after hearing this. Wen Zhan had no status at home, and now he was the servant of the princess's mansion. This status undoubtedly meant a humiliation for a man from a serious family. I'm afraid his father and brother looked down on him. With Chu Qinghuang here, at least no one dared to disrespect him in person. So everyone could understand his feelings. "Come and sit over here," the man in the sky blue brocade shirt said. "It just so happens that I have some questions to ask the second young master. It's convenient to sit together and talk." Wen Zhan smiled and nodded, walked over calmly, and sat down in an empty seat next to the man. Just at this moment, a chaotic sound of footsteps came from the stairs, accompanied by intermittent curses, and one after another young masters came up. The men at the table turned their heads and looked at them at the same time, and then they were all stunned. All of these young masters had red and swollen cheeks, looked embarrassed, and without exception, they were gritting their teeth in anger, as if they had just been slapped. Oh no, not like, they really had just been slapped. Everyone had a subtle expression. At Lord Wen's birthday banquet, what did these young masters do to be caught and slapped? And the young men who could come to the birthday banquet tonight, even if they were not officials in the court, were definitely the sons of officials in the court, ranging from the 4th and 5th ranks to the 1st and 2nd ranks, and each of them was not an ordinary person. Who dared to attack them easily? Even if they were princes, at this critical moment of the competition for the throne, they would never offend so many people at once. "What's wrong with you?" the man in the sky blue brocade shirt sneered. "Which evil spirit did you offend?" The first man who came up was wearing a gorgeous dark green robe. He glared at him fiercely. This glance happened to make him see Wen Zhan next to him. His eyes were cold and cold. Second Master Wen really showed off his power today. The men at the table looked at Wen Zhan when they heard this. The incident started because of Wen Zhan? Everyone thought of the temperament of these young masters on weekdays, thinking that they must have said bad things to Wen Zhan. Unfortunately, today, they ran into the eldest princess and Wen Zhan coming back together. Well, probably only Chu Qinghuang can punish these bad-mouthed people in public without any scruples. "I don't deserve your prestige." Wen Zhan poured himself a cup of tea, looking relaxed. "It's just that the prince consort has just fallen out of favor recently, and His Highness has started to treat everyone equally, so everyone has a chance to get a little favor. If you feel that 20 slaps are not enough, you can continue to insult and abuse me. I promise to memorize it word for word and repeat it to Her Highness the Princess later." When these words came out, everyone's expression froze at the table. Treat everyone equally. Wen Zhan, you are really willing to be lowly? Wen Li, the eldest son of the Wen family, walked up from the stairs coldly, looking at Wen Zhan with contempt in his eyes. "It is a misfortune for the Wen family to have a child like you." Wen Zhan's expression did not change at all, and he smiled nonchalantly. If brother is not lowly, why didn't you have the courage to protect your drinking and eating friends just now? You are a coward in front of the eldest princess, and you dare to ridicule and abuse me when you are out of the eldest princess's sight. Brother is really a good son who is responsible. You, Wenli was furious, you hide behind a woman and show off your power. You use a woman's power to bully others. You are simply shameless. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 37. Shameless. Brother, don't you have any new words to say after all this scolding? Wen Zhan sighed, as if disappointed that the other party had such a lack of vocabulary. Since the day that brother plotted for me to enter the princess's mansion, shame has nothing to do with the Wen family. I am shameless, and brother is not much better. There is no need to curse the entire Wen family together. Wen Li's face turned pale instantly. Others were surprised. Wen Zhan's entry into the princess's mansion as a servant was planned by Wen Li. Second Master Wen is really good at talking nonsense and telling lies with open eyes. A young man standing next to Wen Li said coldly, with a strong look of contempt and resentment in his eyes, "It's obvious that he is relying on a pretty boy to eat soft rice and serve others with his beauty, but he dares to put all the responsibility on the eldest master. Sure enough, relying on the protection of the princess, he dares to make up any lies." When Zhan looked at the person who was talking, his cheeks were also swollen, and it was obviously one of the people who had just ridiculed him outside. This man's surname is Fang Yuan's. His father also works in the Ministry of Revenue, and his official rank is lower than Wen Xingyuan. This Mr. Fang hangs out with Wen Li all day long, as well as the people around Wen Li, Li Yuan, Xiao Tangyu, Yi Yang. These people nominally study together, but in fact they form cliques and factions in the academy, hang out in brothels, drink wine, and are ignorant. At home, they enjoy bullying and suppressing bastards. However, when they go out, they still know how to behave themselves and not cause any trouble. But today they suffered a loss, and it was at the hands of the bastard they always despised, so they naturally felt humiliated and could not easily swallow this breath. Wen Zhan smiled elegantly, "Thank you, Mr. Fang, for your praise. I also think that my face is suitable for serving people with my beauty. And unfortunately, I have just been favored by Her Royal Highness the Princess." Mr. Fang was like a punch on cotton. He was so angry that his face turned pale and he kept scolding him for being shameless. Mr. Fang should read more books on weekdays, Wen Zhan advised kindly, "Otherwise, you don't even have the words to scold people. You just scold them with the same 2 or 3 sentences. It's really meaningless." Wen Li said gloomily, "Wen Zhan." Wen Zhan raised his eyebrows frivolously, and slowly raised his hand to pour himself a cup of tea. "Today is my father's birthday banquet. Brother should not want to make the scene too ugly." Wen Li clenched his hands, angry that he dared to talk to him like this. Only a few days after leaving the Wen family, he became so bold. As expected, his temper became hard after having a backer. Wen Li walked to the main seat on the second floor with a gloomy face and sat down. The men behind him probably worried that Chu Qinghuang was still in the Wen family, and they were afraid that they would anger the ruthless female demon god later, so they had to restrain their temper for the time being. However, he kept thinking about how to make Wen Zhan die without a burial place. "Now the world is really in chaos." Another man suddenly spoke at the table, with a lukewarm tone, which made people very uncomfortable. "The illegitimate son has surpassed the legitimate son, and the legitimate son needs to swallow his anger. A little servant who serves people with beauty can be arrogant at his father's birthday banquet by relying on the princess's power, such no distinction between high and low, and lacks family rules. If the emperor knew about it, I don't know if he would reprimand Lord Wen for not managing the family strictly and having a chaotic family style." This sentence at this time was tantamount to adding fuel to the fire, and it was like a knife stabbing Wen Li's heart, instantly arousing his boiling anger. The legitimate son swallowed his anger? Why should he swallow his anger? A lowly bastard, he used to live his life by following the mistress and his legitimate brother's mood. Even if he entered the princess's mansion, he was still the bastard of the Wen family. He should be servile and begging for mercy in front of his legitimate brother, instead of relying on someone's power to make things difficult for him. Wen Li thought coldly, his eyes fell on Wen Zhan's face, and he decided to teach him a lesson. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 38. Your Highness, the eldest princess, please. When Xingyun opened the study door and gestured to Chu Qinghuang, I will ask someone to serve tea. Master, a man in green clothes hurried over and handed over a secret letter. This is the letter I just received. When Xingyun looked at it, who sent it? We don't know yet. The man in green glanced at Chu Qinghuang hesitantly, then quickly leaned into Mr. Wen's ear and said, emergency matters, please take a look at them before making a decision. Chu Qinghuang stood aside, his expression cold and indifferent, and there was no strange emotion on his face. When Xingyun hummed, I understand, you can go down. Yes. When Xingyun bowed again, Your Highness, please. Chu Qinghuang nodded, stepped into the study, looked around the study, chose a chair in front of the bookshelf and sat down. Soon a servant came in to serve tea. When Xingyun walked behind the desk and sat down. He silently opened the letter and read it carefully. Then his expression suddenly changed. The letter clearly stated, the eldest princess has obtained the evidence and will inspect the Wen mansion tomorrow. Chu Qinghuang held the teacup, glanced across Wen Xingyun's face, and said casually, is it related to me? Wen Xingyun was startled and subconsciously rolled up the letter. However, when he faced Chu Qinghuang's mocking eyes, for some reason, he just felt like he was suddenly in a room filled with cold air, airtight. The cold air penetrated bit by bit from the pores of the whole body, making people shiver. Master Wen, don't be nervous. I am coming to the Wen family tonight to support you. Not many people know about it in advance, but this letter should have been prepared for a long time. Chu Qinghuang's eyebrows were cold. I might as well tell Master Wen today. After all, the first person I want to raid is the house of Lord Hong, the Minister of Household Affairs. After the collapse of the Hong family, the position of minister will be vacant. Lord Wen should understand what I mean. Wen Xingyun was stunned. Before he could recover from the news in the letter, he was caught off guard when he heard Chu Qinghuang's words. It was as if his fear and uneasiness suddenly turned into a surprise from the sky, and he felt like a world of ice and fire. He composed himself, Your Highness means. Master Wen is a minister of the mother-in-law family, but Hong Shangshu supports concubine Feng and the third prince. Chu Qinghuang said in a calm voice, Master Wen, do you think I will be stupid enough to deal with one of your own? Wen Xingyun rubbed the letter in his hand more and more tightly. So, someone deliberately took advantage of the eldest princess to come to cheer him up. There are two ministers on the left and right in the Ministry of Household Affairs. After Hong Shangshu goes down, whether Lord Wen will take the position of Shangshu or Lord Yang will sit. I may be able to give some suggestions in front of the Emperor. Chu Qinghuang said calmly, but there are conditions. Are there conditions? Wen Xingyun felt slightly relieved. It's easy to handle if you have the conditions, but if she doesn't have the conditions, pie in the sky things are always unsettling. Wen Xingyun pondered for a moment, what does your highness want me to do? Wen Zhan is my servant. Recently, I just learned that he has good knowledge. Chu Qinghuang took a sip of tea and said calmly, the biggest wish of a scholar is to one day be able to obtain fame. I don't want to watch it. All his knowledge was buried. Your highness means, to let Wen Zhan become an official, Wen Xingyun frowned, obviously very surprised by Chu Qinghuang's decision. Wen Zhan is a concubine and a servant of Her Highness the Princess. He has no regard for emotion or reason. Qualifications for office. Master Wen, there is no need to worry about this, and there is no need to find any excuses to stop it. There is no problem that I cannot solve. Chu Qinghuang held the teacup and said in a calm tone, I am here today just to inform Master Wen of this matter thing. Wen Xingyun closed his eyes and fell silent. He couldn't help but think about the news that had come out of the eldest princess's palace in recent days. Feng consort fell out of favor and his status plummeted. Chu Qinghuang suddenly brought Wen Zhan to attend his birthday banquet. Did this mean that Wen Zhan had begun to, after catching Chu Qinghuang's eyes, he has now replaced Feng consort as Chu Qinghuang's favorite man? Although this kind of favor is not glamorous and may not last long, at least for now, it should be able to help him get some benefits. Chu Qinghuang has always been generous to those he likes. Wen Xingyun secretly weighed the situation in his mind. The eldest princess was concubine Duan's daughter, and the Wen family was concubine Duan's backing. They were all in the same boat. If the eldest princess loves Wujai Wu because she dotes on Wen Zhan, then the position of Minister of the Ministry of Revenue should be within easy reach for him. Of course, the premise is that he agrees to Chu Qinghuang's conditions. He had no reason not to agree. It was a good deal for him to exchange Wen Zhan for the position of Minister of Household Affairs. I agree to His Highness's conditions, Wen Xingyun said quickly. I wonder when Your Highness plans to take action. Chu Qinghuang said, probably Ming. Sir, it's not good, the Wen family member reported urgently from outside. With audible anxiety, the eldest young master and several young masters beat up the second young master. What? Wen Xingyun's expression suddenly changed and he subconsciously looked at Chu Qinghuang. Your Highness, I will handle this matter well and never let Zhaner suffer any injustice. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 39. Wen Xingyun opened the door and motioned for Chu Qinghuang to go first. The sky was dark like a waterfall, and the lights in the yard were flickering. The light was dim. Chu Qinghuang raised his feet and stepped out of the room. He was faced with a cold wind that suddenly hit like lightning. With a sharp chilling air, he only directed towards Chu Qinghuang. The facade is closing in. Chu Qinghuang's eyebrows suddenly turned cold. His right hand had already made a killing move, but suddenly stopped. A figure in black flashed out like a ghost, still as vigorous as a leopard in the forest at night. With a click, he broke the assassin's neck with one move, and then raised his hand to slash. The sound of broken bones was particularly special at night. Clear and creepy. Bang, 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 bang. The four corpses fell to the ground in just an instant, without any breath. Wen Xingyun's face turned pale with fear. Come, someone is coming. There is an assassin. There is an assassin. Only then did messy footsteps begin to sound outside. The Wen family guards rushed over. When they saw the assassin lying on the ground, their expressions changed. What's going on? Wen Xingyun pointed at the assassins on the ground and asked, why are they here? Chu Qinghuang turned her head and gave him a cold look. Don't be impatient for a moment. Wen Xingyun suddenly fell silent. Fukang, Chu Qinghuang said in a calm voice, turning to look at Fukang, these four people are dead soldiers. Fukang nodded, yes. Dead soldier? Wen Xingyun's face turned pale. A dead soldier actually sneaked into his mansion? If the man in black named Fukang hadn't taken action in time just now, or in other words, if Chu Qinghuang hadn't been here tonight, he would have been in trouble. On the night of his 50th birthday, died of an assassination? They should be coming for me. Chu Qing Huang silently walked to the side of the assassins, squatted down, and uncovered one of them's face. Suddenly a burst of smoke came. Chu Qing Huang's body suddenly moved backwards, but there was still a wisp of fragrance that was inhaled into his lungs. Fukang's expression suddenly changed. Bang! He kicked the body in black and flew far away. Then Fukang stretched out his hand to support Chu Qing Huang's body. He quickly tapped the key points all over his body several times to seal off the major veins. His voice changed, "Master." Dizzy. Chu Qing Huang felt a sharp pain in her heart, and a streak of blood came out of the corner of her mouth. Wen Xingyun was so frightened that he fainted. "Your Highness! Your Highness, the eldest princess! Someone! Go and call for the imperial doctor. Call for the imperial doctor right away." The guard was about to take the order and leave, but heard Chu Qing Huang say coldly, "Shut up, everyone." "Your Highness, the eldest princess." Wen Xingyun stepped forward and looked at her uneasily. "The princess is in critical condition now and needs to be treated by an imperial physician immediately." "Don't say anything." Chu Qing Huang closed her eyes and suppressed the cramping pain in her lungs. "I won't die yet." After saying this, she took out a porcelain bottle from her sleeve, uncorked it, poured a pill and threw it into her mouth. Wen Xingyun looked at her in shock. Is there really no need to call in a doctor? He couldn't even imagine what consequences the Wen family would face if something happened to the eldest princess in the Wen family. Even if he did not instigate the assassination and Emperor Longyan was furious and punished him, the Wen family would not be able to escape responsibility. "Don't alarm anyone, so as not to cause everyone uneasiness." Chu Qing Huang broke away from Fukang's support. "I am fine." Seeing that she seemed to be fine, Wen Xingyun suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, his face still a bit pale. "Your Highness, don't worry, the guests are all in Shui Yun Pavilion, which is some distance away from the study. As long as we don't send someone to inform, the guests will know what's going on here." Chu Qing Huang turned his head thoughtfully and looked at Fukang standing aside. The light was dim at night, and Fukang, who was dressed in black, had his eyes slightly lowered. His face was abnormally pale, and he completely lost the composure that a shadow guard should have. Chu Qing Huang's heart was moved and he said calmly, "Fukang." Fukang raised his eyes, with an emptiness and fear that could not be concealed. Chu Qing Huang frowned, not expecting him to have such a big reaction, and said calmly, "I am negligent. It has nothing to do with you. I will not punish you for your inability to protect the Lord." Fukang lowered his head and clenched his hands unconsciously at his sides. After a long moment, he nodded in detail, "Yes. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 40. Wen Xingyun looked at the corpses on the ground and was a little scared. "Your Highness, what should we do with these corpses?" Chu Qing Huang was silent for a moment. "Find a place where no one is and set fire to it." "Yes." Wen Xingyun quickly ordered the guards to move the body. At this time, someone came from outside to urge him, "Sir." "The second young master." Wen Xingyun was simply exhausted. Things went wrong one after another at a good birthday party. Those young gentlemen offended the eldest princess with their lack of foresight, and assassins came to assassinate her again, causing the eldest princess to almost die. Now, even his legitimate son, who was always proud of him, is causing trouble for him. He was really afraid that His Highness would lose his temper and whip him on the spot until his head would explode. Wen Xingyun suppressed his emotions and bowed to Chu Qing Huang. "I'll go and see what happened." Chu Qing Huang hummed, without comment. So Wen Xingyun asked the maid to serve the eldest princess well, then turned around and walked out. After walking a few steps, he suddenly remembered something and turned to Chu Qing Huang and said, "I will definitely give an explanation to the princess about the assassin's appearance. Your Highness was frightened tonight, and I deserve death. I will investigate the assassin matter, so you don't have to worry too much, Chu Qing Huang said in a cold tone, turned around and walked out. Go to Shuiyun Pavilion and have a look. Yes. It wasn't until we walked further and got closer to Shuiyun Pavilion that Wen Xingyun calmed down and suddenly realized that Her Royal Highness's temper seemed to be much better tonight than before. When he was provoked by those dandy brothers outside the Wen family's gate, each of them only received 20 slaps. When he was assassinated just now, he was not held accountable for his crime. After all, he was appearing in the Wen family's house at this moment, and he could not escape responsibility. In the past, the Wen family would have been extraordinarily merciful even if they didn't bring blood to bear. Thinking like this, Wen Xingyun became more and more frightened. He quietly glanced at Chu Qing Huang out of the corner of his eye and secretly thought that a person with a bad temper suddenly became good-tempered. What's the reason? What was the origin of those assassins just now? Who sent it? Why assassinate the eldest princess? Although Chu Qing Huang said that he would not be held accountable, does this mean that he fell into the hands of Her Royal Highness the Princess? As long as she is slightly dissatisfied with the Wen family, this incident can be used as an excuse to accuse the Wen family at any time, as long as the eldest princess insists that the assassin is the mastermind of the Wen family. Then he can't argue. The more Wen Xingyun thought about it, the more chills ran down his spine. After entering Shuiyun Pavilion, Wen Xingyun walked up the stairs to the second floor under the guidance of his servants. From a distance, he heard Wen Li's angry voice, "There are state laws and family rules. Don't say that you are just the eldest princess now, your servant. Even if you become the consort in the future, you will still be the concubine of the Wen family. In front of my brother, you can only kneel down and speak." Wen Xingyun's expression changed and he couldn't help but speed up and walk up. "Come here. Make Wen Zhan kneel down immediately. I will let him know what family rules are today. Stop." Wen Xingyun hurriedly walked to the lobby on the second floor and saw Wen Li sitting on a chair in the center of the lobby. Behind him were several noisy young men from aristocratic families. If you look carefully, most of them were the ones who were beaten outside the gate just now. At this time, several guards were rudely escorting Wen Zhan in front of Wen Li, and even tried to force Wen Zhan to kneel down. Most of the people at the other seats were either watching the excitement or watching indifferently, as if it had nothing to do with them. Appearance. Wen Xingyun quickly walked up to Wen Li, raised his hand and slapped him across the face. "You rebellious son! Can you live in peace?" The air became stagnant for a while. Wen Li stood up in shock and raised his hands to cover his face in disbelief. "Father." Wen Xingyun turned his head and looked at the people who were still holding Wen Zhan's arms, and said angrily, "Why don't you let the second young master go? Do you all want to die?" Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix.